All right. So welcome everyone to another edition of Webinars for Busy Lawyers. And today the topic is communications, client communications that clients love. So if you're someone who hears from your clients a little bit too often, they expect to communicate with you maybe more often than you prefer, how do you manage that? So Schiro Greenwald is going to share some communication guidelines today. And so we want to try to see clients as equal partners in the resolution of their legal issues. And so we want to be able to understand their options and participate in a process that solves their problems. And so what Carol is going to do in this webinar is help us figure out how to establish good communication guidelines that will set client expectations. And I believe she's going to touch upon some communication preferences and thinking about creating a project budget, adopting quote-unquote literacy protocols for client-oriented written materials, and communicating progress in invoices. So Carol is a PhD. She has a PhD in comparative constitutional and legal systems. Is that correct, Carol?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So she, what she does is she works with clients to create pragmatic strategies that generate business and focus on the best opportunities for growth. And so she uses different marketing techniques, business development strategies, and business intelligence research to help people focus on their primary clients and build their practice around them. And her specific services include individual coaching, group training, and development of research-based strategic plans for growing the 20% of the clients who provide you 80% of revenues, which is a great way to look at that. She's written a book, an American Bar Association book, which is Build Your Practice the Logical Way, Maximize Your Client Relationships. And my understanding is that book came out in 2012. So I want to welcome her today, and Carol's going to give us some great information, and I'm gonna let her do that. And once she does that, I will pose some questions. So if you do have a question, please type those into the chat box, and I will pose those questions to her after. So with that, Carol, please take it away.
Thanks. Okay, so let's start with the typical client, right? John Pierpont Morgan lived in the early 20th century, but he could have lived today. He doesn't want you to tell him what he can't do. He wants you to tell him how to do what he wants to do. Now let's put that into the context of today because it's even more emphatic. Today, market forces are impacting us, as you know, like never before. We don't have any clients anymore. Basically, we have consumers. And those consumers want from lawyers what they get from everybody else, they think. And so the first half of what I'm going to talk about is what they want, just to make sure we're all on the same page about that and about how you can give them what they want. And then I'll give you 5 tips that you can do. They don't cost money. It's about an attitude shift rather than depleting your pocketbook. But when we look at the market forces, basically there's 4 of them. One of them is the fact that our marketplace is becoming increasingly crowded by non-legal vendors who offer legal services. And so the business of law is becoming more and more important because those other businesses are out to eat our lunch. Another one is the impact of technological innovation. Clients think that because we have computers, we should be able to cut hours into more than half. We should be able to link with them whenever they want, wherever they want. They also use technology to go online to LegalZoom and download documents and fill them in, and then they think they've done it. They don't know whether it's good or bad, but it's there and it's quick and they did it and it was cheap. And so these kinds of attitudes are working against the traditional way of lawyering. And also clients are researching more online. 37% of all clients go online to look at lawyers and legal services, before they hire lawyers. And so they think from their search that they understand what lawyers do. So basically, this is a mindset that is increasingly difficult to penetrate. So let's talk about how to do that. The first thing is, let's remember what you offer. You don't offer paper. You offer a shared experience. That means that you and your client together create what the client is going to remember as the experience of working with a lawyer. The fact that they're going to come out with a legal document or several documents is not how they're going to measure. They're going to measure, was the experience one I liked? Was it like other client service providers? What was it shared? Were you relevant? Was what I got useful? But here's what you can do. You can use that to set expectations about what it's like to work with a lawyer. So for instance, you can use what Rule 2.1 says you should be doing. Use your advisor role. Explain all the time what the options are and why they're different from what they see on TV and they're different from real life. It's very hard to explain to the average client the impact of precedent on the legal world. They don't really get it. And so you have to explain to them some of the strange by modern ways of thinking, things you have to do in order to make what they want happen. Also, you want to talk to them about the risks, about the positives, about what they can expect, even if you think that they should already know it, because they may not. So it's very important that you do that. And finally, the most disarming thing that you can do is if they ask you a question and you don't know the answer, if you say, I don't know, but I'll find out, they will love you forever, because that's what humans do. But they don't expect that from lawyers, because on TV, no lawyer ever does that. What they think a real lawyer is like is unfortunately a lot of what they see on the legal shows. So clients know a lot that you need, that will be important in how you work with them. You've got to give them credit for that. First of all, they know a lot about their own industry, their own company, their own challenges in that area. If they know a lot about their own situation, for instance, are they going to be fired, or is the company going to go out of business if you can't resolve their problem? Or are they just anticipating something and it's less serious in terms of their own work? They can't tell how good a lawyer you are, but they can tell, and they do care, how much you know about their world, how much you explain about where law overlaps, and how much you accept their views as relevant and useful. So they will often, though, forget to tell you things that you really need to know. So, you're doing a divorce case and they forget to tell you that they live in the mother's house and she pays for all of their living expenses. Well, that's kind of useful. Depending on which side you're on, you're going to need to know that. Or that it's a real estate transaction and they forget to tell you who the minor owners are. Or they forget to tell you that there's a lien on the property. Why do they forget? They're not trying to lie. They forget because they've already absorbed the knowledge and they're living with it. So you have to be sure when you're asking the questions, you think about the question behind what they said to you and try and get a sense of the context and of the history behind it. And also what clients know is what service looks like. But here's what they think service looks like. They think it looks like Amazon. They think it looks like their car mechanic. They think it looks like a restaurant and the waiter. They are comparing you to other service providers. And they are saying, are they as quick? Are they as nice? Are they as understandable? Are they as willing to treat me like I'm worthy of respect? And so sometimes what happens is the traditional way of looking at clients gets in the way of you, the lawyer, being able to give them that kind of empathy and validation that they're looking for. So what clients want is What's in it for me? WIIFM. Now, there's three kinds of results, and it's important that you remember all of them, because if you remember all of them and use them together, you will be relevant, understandable, and doable. So the first one is strategic. That's the one you all know. They want the outcome. What are you going to do that fixes or alleviates whatever the problem is? They want you to minimize risk. Risk is strategic in terms of where they want to go. It's also risk in financial. What's it going to cost? What is your pricing? How can I understand what the parameters are for what I'm asking for? You know, is it bigger than a bread box? Am I asking for a jalopy to go to the station, or am I asking for a Jaguar? What am I getting? And a lot of times when we talk about pricing, we forget that we need to explain it to them in terms of how humans buy everything else. So if you're billing by the hour, they don't understand that because nobody else bills by the hour. And so the notion that they're going to ask you to do something and that the price is unknown is a difficult concept. You have to make sure that they understand your pricing model. Not that they say yes, but that they understand it. And they repeat it back to you and repeat it back in terms of what they're going to have to do. That's how you'll know if they understand it. The second kind of result they want is operational. What are you going to save them in terms of money, in terms of time, in terms of effort? They also want to know, in terms of transparency that we'll talk about in a minute, what are you going to do to align the incentives between what they want and what you're doing? How are you going to increase the productivity and efficiency on their matter? Because this is important to them, particularly if you bill by the hour. And they want predictable costs because they're going to have to fit it into their company budget or their household budget. They're going to have to figure out how to pay this. So it's very important to them that it be as predictable as possible. The third kind of result is emotional. We always like to think, particularly in the legal world, that the rational sphere of the mind is the most important and dominates. But the truth of the matter is it doesn't. Everything that we think comes first through our emotions. And the way to have people pay attention and to understand what you're talking about is to get to them through emotions. So what are their emotions involved? Well, one is personal safety. Are they going to be fired? Are they okay? Is their mentor going to be fired? What's going to happen? A second one is control. You know, these are people, probably your clients, who are used to running their lives, running their businesses. And yet something important has come up and they are dumping it in a world they don't understand to somebody who says they can make it happen for them. So where's their control? Well, they're feeling kind of at loss because they don't see a lot of it. And then another emotional one is, where am I going? How is this going to fit into the rest of my life, into the rest of the company's life? What's going on? These are very real. They may not voice them to you, but they are lying underneath some of the emotional eruptions that you may get at one time or another. So now let's look at the left side here, what clients want. Clients say, when you survey them, that responsiveness is the most important factor in developing a positive relationship with lawyers. So why do they say that? They say that because for most clients, responsiveness to them means, how important am I to you, the lawyer? So if I'm important to you, I assume that you're going to call me back right away, that I'm going to be top of mind, that when I send an email, you're going to send an email right back. Ping pong time, back and forth, back and forth. So if you don't, if you're in court all day, or if you're drafting something all day, or if you're working on another matter all day, they go, oh, someone's more important than I am. He doesn't like me anymore. She doesn't want to talk to me. And they begin to feel upset that their lawyer, this personal person for them, isn't around. So responsiveness is more important to them than you would think it would be. Also, they want you to be able to do the billing their way. They want you to be able to do emails their way because they want basic technological compatibility. And they also want advice. Advice in the 21st century is the way lawyers are going to get rich, because advice is something that LegalZoom doesn't do very well, that many of the others don't do, and that the computer algorithms don't do yet. Human advice is what people want and what they want to pay for. So basically, communication is the key way of creating that shared experience. So you have to be accessible. That's not negotiable. They want you to sync with them. They want you to stop the pain. I want you to notice that nowhere in the top things clients want is legal expertise. They just assume it. They can't measure it because they're not lawyers and they don't know how to practice law. So they assume that if they hired you, you're an expert, which is to your advantage. But it's kind of interesting that the way we all value ourselves is different from the way clients look at us. So how do you give them what they want? First of all, you really listen when they talk to you about their world and what their problems are, so that you can keep referring to their context for the issues in the case. You also want to see the encounter as much as you can from their point of view. You don't have to accept it. You don't have to believe it. All you have to do is validate it. You have to say, I hear you, and I understand where you're coming from, and I respect your opinion. You don't have to do anything more. But in doing that, what you're saying is, I'm not just woofing it off. I'm not going to treat you like a jerk. I'm going to listen to you. It's your world. I'm going to listen. And then you need to make them comfortable in the legal world, and they aren't, because lawyers speak a different language. Lawyers work in a world that is different from modern business. I can't think of a modern business that has the kind of precedent impact that we have in the legal world. They don't understand courts and the court system. It's very difficult to tell the head of a small company that you're going to have to wait 6 months because you're sorry, but the judge is busy. They won't put the case on the docket. They don't get that. They don't understand. So you need to be explaining to them some of these, I think they're charming, but I don't know that all clients do, ways in which law is different from 21st century business life. And you have to know their world. You have to know, if you're dealing with humans, what are of concern to people in their demographic. If you're dealing with companies, what's happening in their world? What are the trends in their industry? Because that is how they are going to evaluate your knowledge. Because they want you to know as much as they do. And being thrifty these days, they don't want to pay for your learning curve. Which gets us to one more thing before we go into the things you can do. Value. Value is a person's perceptions of the worth of the service in relation to its cost. It is purely personal, and it's theirs. You can influence it by influencing their expectations, but their perception is their perception. So it's very important that you understand where they're coming from and influence their perceptions so that they will value what you're doing. And people work with people that they trust. That's a truism. We all know that. So what does that mean? That means for clients that actions speak louder than words. Want to say you're reliable? Be on time. Want to say you're trustworthy? Do what you say you're going to do. Want to say that you understand punctuality and the clock? Meet deadlines. Want to say that your mom brought you up right and you're courteous? Say please and thank you. Please do this. Please sign. Thank you for your time. Doesn't cost you anything. Makes a big difference in terms of how the client feels. And finally, they want to know, do you know me? How are you going to show that in actions? By asking the kinds of questions that show that you understand the world that they're working or living in. And add to that body language. do what we call in the body language world, match and mirror. So if your client is leaning back, legs crossed, looking comfortable, do the same. Get out from behind your desk and sit across a table from them rather than your imposing desk. Make it a discussion, that visible discussion between two people that are equal in that they know more about their world and you know more about what you need to do to solve their problem. When it's two human beings talking from two easy chairs, there is the visual perception of equality that makes a huge difference. Again, this is a mindset. You can do all of these things. You just need to think about it from their point of view. Walk a mile in my shoes. Remember that? I think it's some country music song says it too. That's what you need to do. When you can do that, clients will love you and they'll forgive you for anything and they'll be loyal forever. And it has nothing to do with the result of the case and everything to do with how you as a human treat them as a human. Let's go to 5 best practices. The first one is that client intake interview. So many clients, in my experience, lawyers, my clients, just woof it off. Oh yeah, I'll listen to them. I'm not going to really pay attention because we really haven't started the clock yet or whatever. And they don't understand that basically in that client intake interview, you are setting the ground rules. You are establishing their first expectations of how you will act and how you expect them to act. So you should be taking notes. You should be asking the key questions behind the questions. You should be trying to find out what's in it for them as well as what the legal situation is. You should offer them empathy because it's a tough situation or they wouldn't be there. Validation because their view of it is their view of it. Doesn't have to be right or wrong, but it's what you're going to be working with. And show respect. Every human knows whether you're respecting or disrespecting them. We learn it when we're kids. And it's very important that no matter what you may think in terms of working with them, that you respect their ability to do however much they can do. During this client intake interview, when you're talking about what you do, show them the Bar Association's list of client rights and client responsibilities. Because in that client responsibilities one, it talks about how they should behave to make the case go better. And it's a very good neutral way of beginning to set cooperation ground rules. Finally, summarize everything verbally at the meeting and then send them a follow-up. When you send your client engagement agreement, put a follow-up letter or introduction in the email or wherever you want that summarizes your main takeaways from that client intake interview and what you want to use to set the ground rules. You've got all the power here. And most of the time what I find is my lawyer clients give it away. They just don't put enough effort into making sure that you start with the same set of assumptions. Communication preferences. So what's the big deal? The big deal is that when you ask your clients how they prefer to be contacted and how they want to work with you, you are verbally establishing for them a level playing field. You're treating them like a partner in this. And you should, because they are your partner in this. Your rules of professional responsibility require it, and it will make it so much easier to work for the client if you do that. So what is your preferred point of contact? Think about that. You know, personally, I hate my cell phone, so I want you to call my office. Most people love their cell phone, want you to call their cell phone. But then they also have a home phone. They have email. They have snail mail. You need to know how they want to hear from you. And then, you need to know whether they want to talk to you on weekends, evenings, whatever. Who is it that they don't want to hear what's going on? You know, if it's a personal matter, they may want to talk to you from their office with the door closed. But if it's an office matter, they may want to talk to you at home with the door closed. It's nice to ask them. Same with time of day. Some people like to do all these kinds of calls first thing in the morning, some the end of the day. By asking them, you are not promising to do this. What you're saying is we will try to the best of our ability to structure our relationship to take into account what you're telling us. Same with how do they prefer to meet? And then key is how involved do you want to be? Do you want to be looking over my shoulder over every Mickey Mouse decision? Or do you want to only come in at choice points? How much leeway are you giving me? Your rules of professional conduct require that you ask that, but rarely do we ask it in a way that makes the client feel like you're not woofing them off. Ask them how they want to be involved so that you can take advantage of that later. Okay, matter transparency is so important today. People don't want things done and handed to them. Think about a restaurant. How many new restaurants do you see where you can look into the kitchen? Or the waitress tells you where every single thing on your plate came from, how long it lived, who its parents were. Transparency, more than we need. Same is true of working together. They want to know who's going to be working on my case. What are they going to be doing? How do I call you? If you're busy, who do I call next? What is everyone's phone number and email? Give me the lay of the land on this. Let me be a part of this group. And then again, expectations about how you want them to participate. And then there are 3 transparency process pieces. The first one is a budget. Can you, to the extent possible, create a budget that says the first 3 phases of what we're going to do are going to take 25% of the budget. I'm going to estimate it's X, estimate it's Y, etc. So again, they have a context of an idea of a timeline and a dollar amount. Schedules. Can you set out schedules to some degree ahead of time? And when there's a long period between them, when there's 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, schedule up-to-date calls with them. But all you're going to say is, still waiting, we're all set to go, we're waiting for whatever you're waiting for. But what it does is it takes that nagging, I'm not important to him piece that's emotionally eating them away and says, oh, he did remember me. Isn't that nice that he called? And once again, you have gotten a client to love you. And then timelines to the extent that you can show them. You have the experience, you know which parts are going to go quickly and what could take forever. And because you now know who the other side is and what your client has told you about them, you can make a good guesstimate probably of where you're going to find cow pies and problems. As you provide this kind of transparency to what you're thinking, how you're thinking, and when you're thinking it, you are involving the client at that rational level so that they can control their own emotional upset. This is very important. You want them to control it so that you don't have to. Literacy protocols, that's what I call it. Because if I had a penny for every client email or letter that went out with grammatical errors, typos, and jargon, I would never have to work again and I could travel and live wonderfully, because lawyers are busy and they just don't take the time to look. So I have a couple of things I think you should do to keep your client in your loop, to keep the expectations you've set in the beginning important and front of mind, and to keep them content. The first thing is, whenever you send something to a client, a document, never just send the document. Always send a preface that says, this is what I'm sending you. This is its purpose. Remember, we have come from A to B to C to D, and now it's time to do this in order to move on to X, Y, and Z, so that they know exactly what it is, what it's going to do for them, WIIFM, and how to work with it. Explain the purpose, highlight what you want them to do. For goodness sake, check grammar and spelling. Then do this. Lay it aside for 1 hour. Reread it, and I'm sure you'll find something that doesn't make sense or isn't exactly what you wanted to say before you send it. There's practically nothing in my 25 years of working with lawyers I found that if it wasn't sent that minute, it wouldn't matter. So now let's do this right before we end. I see we're at 12:30. Invoices. Invoices are marketing documents. What they do is they say to the client, hello, you hired me to do this. Now I've done this much of it, and we're moving forward. And these things have taken place to make it happen for you. So you want to use action language. You want to tell them what you've done at each stage. You want to make it into a story so that they can see where they were, where they are, and where they're going. You want them to understand that. So that is very, very important. And to the extent you can, try to find a way in your narrative to use real people time. 0.6 of an hour does not compute for humans. For instance, when they see 0.70, they don't know what that means. So they don't know whether that means 70 minutes or whatever. And they're always getting it wrong. Trust me, they're always getting it wrong. So if you can figure out a way or make your time management billing system figure out a way to turn 0.1 of an hour, if that's what you're using, into real time, clients will be much more interested to pay your invoices. And make sure that you bill promptly. You did it, bill for it. The longer you take between when you do something and when you ask for the money, the less likely you are to get the full amount. That's just, we've proved that time and again. So finally, basically, if you will use these verbs on the remember side, you will be basically walking a mile in their shoes. And by sharing the whole process with them, you will create a happy client who loves you, tells everybody, and never works with anyone else. Thank you very much.
All right, well, thank you so much, Carol. These are some excellent tips that everyone can implement today. If you do have a question, please feel free to put it in the chat box right now. But if you have a question that you would like to pose to Carol at a later date, as you see, she has her contact information up here, email, phone number. But I think this is such an important topic, client communication and management. It's important for so many reasons. It's so important to put yourself in your client's shoes, as Carol discussed. I think, one of the things that we can all do immediately following the presentation is to actually get up behind our desks and sit next to our clients. That's a simple change that we can make, and so many others. So Carol, I do have one question in here that I will pose to you, and I see there's a number of people that are asking about the slides. And Carol, are you willing to, you're okay sharing the slides with us and attendees?
Absolutely, of course.
Okay, so we will make sure that the slides and a recording of this will also be posted on our website. So you will all have access to those. I do have a question here, and the question is, any tips on what we can do to get clients to communicate better with us?
Meaning that they're not telling you, I'm assuming, what you need to know, or they're telling you too late, or they're coming in from left field and saying, oh, I forgot to tell you, this kind of thing. Maybe. I think that goes back to the client intake interview, where you need to be asking the kind of reach questions, the how did this happen, why did this happen, who was involved, who are the influencers in this that are influencing the main part? Because you know that in this world, no one ever makes a decision alone. There's always somebody back in the closet somewhere that's pulling the strings, having the influence. So you need to be asking them the questions behind the questions to find out everything you need at the beginning that you can. And then, as part of the expectations, tell them how you would like them to continue to communicate with you and what you're going to need to know as you go along. Because maybe some of the things they have to look up for you, or they have to think about it and figure it out, or they have to find it. Tell them when you want it and how you want it. Set that up in your schedule. If you ask them to be part of it and treat them with the respect for what they're contributing, that will go a long way to making them want to do whatever they need to please you. I don't know if that helped, but it's a mind thing. All of this is about attitude, much more than about, you know, pieces of paper or this or that. The paper is just to confirm what you're already doing.
Great. Well, it sounds like that answered the question, because I got to thank you.
Okay.
I don't see any additional questions, but I am seeing a lot of folks saying that this was a great, outstanding presentation. So, Carol, I do want to thank you again, and also just to let everyone know that the date for our next webinar is February 21st, and that we'll be hearing from Vita Jones-Richardson on using technology to boost your marketing efforts. So you can save that date. And again, the slides and a recording will be posted on our website. So thank you everyone for tuning in, and thank you so much, Carol, for your time and your expertise.
Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.